It's me. Last week. Once upon a time, I presented here. Well, not here, but May 2015, I presented at it was TechTO at the time. And I was running a company called Checkout 51, and it was pretty good luck because 2 months later, we sold the company, which was good. We sold it to a division of News Corp. Kevin was right, the process of selling your company is hell, but I gotta be honest with you, it's pretty fucking amazing when you do. You know, I know you're supposed to be humble. Oh, it's like just nice to go through. No, it's fucking amazing. It's so nice. It's really rewarding. And it's really painful getting there. The whole journey is like getting punched in the face over and over again, but it actually is great getting there. After selling the company, spent 3 years at the acquiring company, and then I became the dad bus, driving my kids around. These are 2 of them. The oldest, who's now 18, this is a little bit old, is not in this, and she gave me shit. She's like, Dad, what? Like, I don't make your slide? Well, no. I love them all equally, though. So I was the dad bus, and what that meant was I spent a lot of time in the car. And I spent a lot of time listening to podcasts, and I fell in love with podcasts. And, there we go, fell in love with podcasts. And then I had a very strange idea or thought, which was it would be really awkward if I was trapped in an elevator with my favorite podcast host. Because I would be like, oh my God, I know you so well, and you don't know me at all. So that got me thinking, what is it about podcasts that people love so much? And I kind of nerded out. I wasn't doing much. I was being the dad bus. So, and it turns out people love podcasts for like the obvious reason. You know, AirPods were pretty new. There's lots of good content. It's convenient. You can commute. You can, walk the dog, do the dishes, work out. And so that's one of the reasons. But if you go a little bit deeper and you dig a little deeper, it turns out there's some science there. And that people, when you listen to a podcast, it's like voices in your head as opposed to text or video that is at a distance. So when there's voices in your head, it like triggers these intimacy hormones that feel good. And so people really like podcasts for that reason. And then I'm like, okay, there's gotta be more. So if you dig even deeper, it turns out we are evolutionarily wired for verbal storytelling. And this is my awesome caveman drawing. I didn't draw it. But because way back then, that's how we communicated. Before the internet, before the printing press, we told each other stories. It's how we knew how to be safe from the bears so they don't come and kill you. It's how we knew how to find the food. It's how we fell in love. And it turns out we as humans haven't changed since. We are still evolutionarily wired for storytelling. And as a founder, what I realized in hindsight, doing like the postmortem, is that we're always telling stories. And that, and you think like, oh, of course you tell stories. You tell stories to like sell your product. And yes, you are telling stories to your customers, but you're also telling stories to your employees to get them to stay and to get them to be motivated. And you're telling stories to potential employees. And you're telling stories to your suppliers. And you're telling stories to your investors and your potential investors. You're even sometimes telling stories to government regulators. So you're always telling a story. So today, I'm gonna go very quick on my research on how to tell a good story. So number 1, make it personal. Humans connect with humans. They don't connect with inanimate companies or objects, so make it personal. Maybe even start with a picture from when you were 4. Have a clear structure. beginning, middle, end. Beginning, there's a problem. Middle, there's the journey. End, this is the resolution. Create emotion. Data tells, emotion sells. I always tend to think about this of what characters from the movie Inside Out are going to be in my story. Use contrast. You see this in advertising all the time, the before and the after. And this is the key of storytelling. Tension, resolution, relief. Make it relatable. You want your audience to say, that could be me. Be authentic. So I think this is, the most important one up here. People can smell inauthenticity a mile away. Your stories don't have to be, groundbreaking. They just have to be true and authentic, and people can relate to that. Know your audience, know why they're here, who they are, what they care about. And finally, you want to end with purpose. What is your call to action? Do you want them to buy something from you? Do you want them to invest? Do you want them to learn something? Do you want them to be inspired? Know what your call to action is. So I fell so much in love with storytelling that my next venture fell out of an art project that I started doing on the side. And it's called The Real Human Project. And what we do is we help people tell stories, and we help people inside groups or teams or communities tell each other stories to help achieve the mission of that group or team or community. And we do that by having an AI podcast host interview people to get the stories out of them. And then we have professional editors, these are real live people, edit them into short little episodes. So that's quickly how it works is you can pick your AI interviewer or you can create your own. A lot of times we have people tell personal stories, so at offsites or for reunions or executive teams that want to get to know each other better. And then people get interviewed. The interview is actually quite easy when you get interviewed by an AI. It's actually even more comfortable than getting interviewed by a human because you can skip a bunch of questions in a row and not feel like an asshole. You can pause for 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes. We'll edit out the pause. Some people even start answering a question and then they say, let me restart. And then we have human editors, like I said, go through, craft your episode for your approval, and then once you approve it, it drops in your private podcast. That private podcast can be listened in wherever you listen to your podcasts, and you get it through a private RSS feed. So what we find is people using it for all different types of purposes. It's used for remote or hybrid teams who want to get to know each other better. It's a really good way to feel like you're part of something when you actually hear each other's personal stories. Onboarding offsites. This really cool one that we're just starting to experiment with, which is a sales team knowledge hub. So people on a go-to-market team or a revenue team sharing stories about big wins or losses or key insights and helping the team all learn from each other. And then we did the reunion ones is really cool. I went to, how do you say this? I went to Harvard Business School. I look at Alex because he always gives me shit about it. And we had our 20-year reunion last spring, and so we created a private podcast just for my classmates where the AI interviewed people about their life since graduating, and it really just changed the whole dynamic of the reunion. Instead of the same stories over and over and over again, it was like, oh my God, I can't believe you went through that. Or like, I can't believe I'm also dealing with this stuff with my kid or this stuff with my parents, or I also got fired in the middle of COVID, or all these other stories that actually end up coming out. So, and this is the last thing. We find that it works, at least so far, because we're combining three things. We're combining the power of storytelling with the convenience of podcasts and the scalability of AI. Most people thought that they never even considered having a podcast before for this kind of communication. And so we feel like we've kind of stumbled onto something. And like all things, we'll see if it works. That's it. If you want to find me on LinkedIn, they have this QR code that you can get from LinkedIn, and feel free to scan it and connect with me, and we can talk.
Questions?
How do you monetize? How do you get paid?
Who needs to get paid? No. We have two different ways people pay us. So for groups that come together for a time-limited thing, so if they're doing just a reunion or just an offsite, they'll pay us on a per participant basis. So every participant gets the opportunity to get their own episode, get the private link to share in that, and these are US dollars, $140 per head. And then a lot of organizations just want an ongoing custom internal podcast where we'll publish up to 4 episodes a month, and that is $4.95 a month.
While we're waiting for another question, I'll have the mic. What usage stats do you get versus normal podcast? Do people listen to more of it? Does everyone at the company listen to it? Like, what's success look like for one of your customers?
It's a great question. The answer is that it's not, the metrics actually turn out once you get there to be different than what you expect. Because you get half the benefit from simply asking someone to share their story. People feel honored. You actually give a crap about having me share my story. And then the other thing is, even if only the people who work directly with that person hear that person's stories, the ROI on that, in terms of retention, in terms of engagement, in terms of work productivity, is huge. So people, what we find is, they listen, but you don't need the entire company to listen to everyone. You wouldn't have a conversation with every single person in the company anyway, but people use it advantageously as well. So they'll use it advantageously for like, hey, I'm having a meeting with Alex, and we have never met before, but I've been in the company for 6 years. I'm gonna go listen to his episode now before meeting. So it becomes this repository.
Cool. One last question. Is there any more? Right here.
I do. Can I go? Yeah. Noah? Audio material, or do you hand it over to the client, or do you have a platform on which you host the
Sorry,
the audio that comes out, the podcast?
Yeah.
Do you have a platform on which you publish it, or do you hand over the audio to the client and then they take care of it on their own platforms?
We can do either. Most of the time we publish it, and we publish it through an RSS feed. So we can do a public podcast, which can be available on Apple and Spotify and YouTube and wherever, or we can create a private podcast, which can also be available on any platform. And but if you want the audio and you want to publish it in HighSpot or whatever you're on WorkLeap, you can do that.
Just one question. I was very interested in what you're doing. A funny coincidence, I've been doing something very similar for my MBA class, which is I've been trying to host podcasts, and so that people can get to know people from other cliques in the class better. And except there's no AI, it's just me hosting the entire thing and just doing it manually. I'm just curious to hear, when you're doing this for different clients, are you seeing any patterns in what kinds of companies are finding value in this? I'm assuming that a lot of big companies, especially universities, can find a lot of value in this because there's a lot of silos in the company, and people can benefit a lot from hearing, oh, that guy from sales, he sounds interesting, I'd like to meet him, right? Curious to know what kind of patterns you see in the clients that you work with.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned is the exact phenomenon we notice, which is it really tears down the silos. And we actually started like you did. Our lean startup experiment was we actually hired live podcast hosts to interview people. And then we started, and we'd go to like a C-suite, and we'd interview everyone in the C-suite, and everyone shared their audio, and they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I was like, I've got another business. And the answer is, you don't have another business, because not all good products make good businesses. And so I didn't have anything that was scalable. But then we're like, okay, well, how much worse is it gonna be if you have an AI podcast host? And the answer is, it's not. It's just different. And so, yes, AI gives us that scalability that we didn't have before, which makes this something that was previously infeasible for most MBA classrooms or employees or employee network or community or classrooms could never have before.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.